Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Hey, we're in the middle of a series called The Art of Living. And the heart of this series is that this word wisdom really just means skill in the art of living. And so we've just been exploring for the last few weeks what wise people do. And so I want to continue to unpack, explore that together today. But before I do, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of you who gathered here yesterday for IF Conference. What an incredible thing. And for those of you that volunteered to make that happen, hours and hours and hours of work went into that. And I actually snuck in yesterday for a few moments and got some ugly stares, but I was here, and it was really, really cool to see. Chances are pretty good today. In some area of your life, it's gray, it's murky. You're not quite sure what to do in terms of your job, in terms of raising kids, in terms of how much screen time should I allow for my 10-year-old. I mean, it's just life is filled with moments like that, isn't it? Where we just find ourselves choosing between good and better, or bad and worse. And there's not a verse that we can kind of lift out and apply. There's not a verse that, just the Bible doesn't operate like a GPS, does it? It doesn't say turn left here, go right here. And oftentimes we feel kind of left to our own devices to navigate the gray, murky areas of life. And oftentimes people say, well, what would Jesus do? I mean, that's a great question, but oftentimes you're going, I don't know what Jesus would do. He does not talk about debt ratios. I'm not quite sure what I should do in this particular moment. And what the scriptures say that you need, what the scriptures say that I need is something called wisdom, this skill in the art of living, that as we increase in wisdom, we can begin to navigate the gray, the murky waters of life. And I want to talk today about a kind of relationship that if you're anything like me, this is the relationship that the first kind of relationship that gets squeezed out of our life, but it's the kind of relationship that Solomon, the writer of Proverbs, says you need and I need to be a wise person. To kind of set the context for this, I think there's several hot seats that we sit in, all of us, whether you're a Christian or not, in terms of relationships. There's just a pressure that you feel in certain relationships in your life. One of these hot seats is in terms of romantic relationships. There's just a pressure that you feel. If you're married, you feel this pressure. It's a hot seat. If you're dating somebody, is it going to work out? If you're married, are we getting along? Are we dealing with issues? Are we just, like one Marie Kondo episode away from a huge fight? Are we, do you guys know who Marie Kondo is? Some of you gentlemen here, half of your stuff is in a garage sale currently because of Marie Kondo, okay? Your wife is looking at life through a new set of lenses, and if it does not spark joy, it's gone. You need to figure out who Marie Kondo is. Okay. There's that pressure. There's that pressure. If you're single, you feel this pressure. You probably have coffee, dinner with friends, and at the end of the dinner, with friends, there's that question. So, are you seeing anybody? And oftentimes in church, we're the worst about this with single people. We always try to apply that pressure. You like to bowl. If you met Judy, she likes to bowl. You guys would be great together. Oftentimes I have single people in our church who come up to me and they say, I just wish everybody would stop trying to set me up, I see you driving with your 5 kids in a minivan. It feels like a setup. I don't want to do it. And if you're single, by the way, the good news is the Bible teaches that you are not made complete in marriage. You are completely complete in a relationship with your Creator. It's not marriage that completes us. But it's just that pressure. It's every song you hear. It's every movie you watch. There's just kind of that romantic pressure that we feel. There's another kind of hot seat that we sit in, and it's in terms of work. It's in terms of your work relationships. You probably feel this pressure today. It's not what you do, it's who you know. A few of you apparently know that. It's in terms of who you know. Am I connected to the right people? You can gain a job because you know the right people. You can lose a job because you didn't know the right people. Some of us, you travel for work all the time. Some of you are watching this online currently, and you're at a conference or an event because you are networking. You're getting to know people. It's just a pressure. You feel this. It's a hot seat. It's never going to go away. There's another kind of pressure that you feel, and it's in terms of family relationships. In terms of your family, mom, dad, grandkids, if you have aging parents, are we doing a good job taking care of our aging parents? If you have grandkids, do we see the grandkids enough? It's a constant conversation in my house. When was the last time you talked to your mom? When was the last time you talked to your dad? There's just that pressure that's there, especially given the time of year, Christmas, holidays. This pressure just gets turned up. You don't even have to like these people, but the pressure will always be there. It's just constant. It's not going away. Hopefully you do like these people, but it's sort of beside the point. We feel this pressure all the time in these three areas of life: romantic relationships, work relationships, family relationships. But Solomon in the book of Proverbs says all that's fine and good, but there is a fourth kind of relationship that if you don't prioritize it, if you don't put the same kind of energy into it that you put into all these relationships, that it's impossible to be wise. And it's in terms of our friend relationships. And if you're anything like me, our friend relationships, this is the first relationship that gets squeezed out, especially the older you get. In fact, as I say that, some of us go, that was easy in high school. That was easy in college, but when you got married or you had kids or you got really busy at work, isn't it true for all of us? This is the first relationship that we will forget, we don't schedule it, it gets squeezed out of our life. And the problem with that is, whether you're a Christian or not, Solomon says, hey, this is necessary for wisdom, that if you don't put the same kind of energy into who you are around in terms of your friendships, it's impossible to be wise. And your whole life, you're gonna feel pressure in these areas. And unless you decide this is important, unless I decide this is important, we won't feel any pressure at all. We have to be the ones who apply it. And every time you turn on the radio, you're gonna hear songs about relationships. You're never gonna hear a song that the theme of it is, we're great friends. It's just, there's never any movies that are about this. Will they or will they not hang out in the end? It's just, there's no cultural pressure here, unless we decide that it's important. And I would imagine today, intuitively, instinctively, we all know that this is important. When you go through moments of celebration or moments of crisis, you don't think to yourself, I want to take all my nice possessions and put them in a room and cry with them or celebrate with them. No, you think of who do I need to be around in terms of friends, because we all know that it's important, but we're busy. It gets squeezed out. And so what I want to explore together today is through Solomon, through the writer of Proverbs, why this relationship is primary for wise people and why wise people have to prioritize friendships. If you have a Bible, you can turn with me. I have a Bible. Can I borrow a Bible? Anyone? Proverbs, here it is. Chapter 13 is where we are going to begin. And there's a principle. I learned this when I was 18 years old. The camp pastor at a camp that I was at shared this verse, and for 20 years, this verse has shaped my life. Many of you, you've probably heard me talk about this verse before, but it's just so critical to the kind of people we are and the kind of people that we are becoming. This is Solomon. He says this is what wise people understand, that if we walk with the wise, he's talking about friendship, he who walks with the wise will become wise. For a companion of fools suffers harm. For some of us, you go, that was college for me. He who walks with the wise. This is true whether you're a Christian or not, by the way. He who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools will suffer harm. There's a promise in this verse, and it's either working for you today or it's working against you in terms of who you're around, in terms of your friendships. That your friends, and here's kind of the principle, your friends determine the direction, the quality of your life. The kind of person that you are is dictated by who you surround yourself with in terms of friends. And if you go, well, I don't have any friends. Well, loneliness begins to be the thing that determines the direction and the quality of your life. For better or for worse, this principle, it works for us or it works against us. And it's not a behavior thing. Solomon's not saying this is what you need to do. It's a proximity thing. This is who you need to be around. And the closer and closer you get to wise people, as you look at your life, people that are wise, people that are skilled in the art of living, they begin to surround themselves with wise people. But a companion of fools will suffer harm. I would imagine if you're anything like me, if you look back at moments of your life, seasons of your life, where you have a lot of regrets or self-inflicted wounds, moments where you go, I can't believe I bought that. I can't believe I dated him. I can't believe I went there. Whatever it was. I would imagine if you look back on that season of your life and you think about who was around you in that moment, you would say, it makes complete sense that I did those things. In fact, those people might have even been there in that moment with you when you did that, when you have that regret. If you look back, you would go, of course, Hunter and Joey were there. Of course, that kind of worked out that way. Because if you are a companion of fools, it's a proximity thing. You will suffer as a result. As a parent, if you're a parent, oh my goodness, you know that this is true. Whether you're a Christian or not, you watch your kids' friends like a hawk, don't you? Or you at least did this when they were in the house. And you were constantly evaluating. Some of us, you had this conversation this weekend. You are not hanging out with the Jones kid. I know what he's been up to. You're constantly, some of us as parents, you would move out of the state to get your son or daughter away from somebody because you just know a companion of fools will suffer harm. And it's not just a teenage thing. Solomon's saying this is a human being thing. All of us, we need to think about who we surround ourselves with because we're vulnerable to their influence. As adults, I think this is kind of how it works as we go through life. There's 7 billion plus people in the world. And as we go through life, if this is kind of you, we begin to find in a world of 7 billion plus people, maybe 6 or 7 people that we actually let into our circle, the people that we actually trust. Most of us, as we go through life, and it's not so these two friends are really close. Oh, man, there we go. As we go through life, we have a circle of 6, 7 people. Maybe you talk to these people regularly. Maybe some of them even live out of the state. But these are the people that when they're around or you talk to them, your guard is down. You drop your guard. They see the world the same way that you do. It's as Ralph Waldo Emerson said about friendship. Friendship is born that moment when you see the same truth as somebody else. You see politics the same way. You see religion the same way. You see raising kids the same way. And something when you're on the phone or you're around or you're at dinner with one of these 5 or 6 people, your guard, you just feel it. Your guard drops. You feel like I can finally be myself, for better or worse. And something powerful is happening. And what does that is something called acceptance. Acceptance is a powerful drug. Because when you are accepted by somebody, when I'm accepted by somebody, it is like a pill that you take that it causes your guard to drop. And Solomon is saying, be very careful about who you do that around. Because when your guard is down, you are now, and I am now, vulnerable to influence. You'll be influenced by the people. You're not influenced by your barista. You're not influenced by, everybody at work. You are influenced by the people. This isn't a teenage thing. This is a human being thing. By the people that when they're around or you talk to them, your guard begins to drop. They accept you. You accept them. And Solomon says a wise person is constantly evaluating in the same way you put energy into your marriage or the same way you put energy into building relationships at work. A wise person is evaluating, who am I vulnerable to their influence? Who is my circle? And if you say, well, I don't think it's anybody, a wise person begins to say, well, it needs to be somebody because he who walks with the wise grows wise. And so if you kind of hear that verse, if that's true, which I believe that it is, all of a sudden what we begin to do, what wisdom calls us to do, especially if you're new to church or you're coming back to church for the first time in a long time and you're trying to step on the path of the wise financially or in terms of your marriage or in terms of raising kids, a wise person begins to say, there's somebody who's in my circle, or there's somebody, it's a proximity thing. I need to begin to move them out. Is there anybody right now that's in your sort of inner circle that you go, you know what? It's not that he's a bad guy. It's just that he's kind of bad for me right now. I don't need to be vulnerable to his influence. It's not that, and especially if you're new to church or you're kind of coming back to church for the first time in a long time, you hear that, you go, that is horribly insensitive. I could never do that to Frank. I mean, Frank and I, we've been friends since, 5th grade. I mean, we love Frank. I mean, he's Frank the Tank, man. He's a great guy. I know I'm always picking on guys named Frank around here. I don't know why. I'll pick a new name. So Sheila. You got to move Sheila out. Sheila, it's bad. It's Tequila Sheila. She got to... I give up. I don't know. And there's something in you that goes, well, I couldn't do that. Solomon's saying, listen, it's a proximity thing. And it's not that she's a bad person. I bet she's hysterical. I bet she's great. But if you're trying to step on the path of the wise and she doesn't have any regard for her well-being, she doesn't, have any regard for her marriage, she doesn't have any regard for her liver, whatever, and you're trying, I'm so sorry, Sheila, I don't know. And you had to sit on the front row. I need to begin to think about how, in terms of proximity, and we need people in our life who aren't Christians. I certainly, agree with that, but it's a proximity thing. How close, whose influence are you going to be vulnerable to? And especially if you're new to church or you're coming back to church for the first time in a long time, Solomon says, begin to invite the right people in and begin to move the wrong people out of your circle of influence. It's not that they're a bad person, but they just may be bad for you right now. And what does the wise person do? What does the other half of it say? He who walks with the wise begins to grow wise. It's a shortcut to wisdom. It's a shortcut to skill in the art of living. If you're in murky waters, you're not quite sure what to do, how to navigate a circumstance, Solomon says, surround yourself with wise people. If you've never read the Bible, you don't even know a song that we sing. You don't know any songs that we sing here. You're going, this whole thing is kind of new to me. And when I said Proverbs, you thought, what is a proverb? Solomon says, just if you're trying to find a shortcut to wisdom, yes, read the Bible, yes, pray, but the fastest way to begin to gain wisdom is to surround yourself with wise people. It's a proximity thing. Begin to move the right people in. And then he's going to give a series of counterintuitive principles on what a wise friendship begins to look like, how we begin to put energy into choosing who our friends are and whose influence we are going to be vulnerable to. He gives a series of very sort of practical, but I would argue counterintuitive principles when you find that person, when you find a friend, for how this whole friendship thing is supposed to work. You keep going. Oh, poor Frank. Moving back. Sheila, there you go. He says this, counterintuitive principles here for friendship. Proverbs verse 24 of chapter 18. We'll place these on the screens. And you read this on the surface, you go, that doesn't even sound Christian. It just sounds strange. But he says this, a man of too many friends comes to ruin. Or do you think, that's not true? I mean, we're supposed to have a lot of friends. I'm supposed to be well networked. I'm supposed to, he's talking, and the definition of friend in our culture is very murky, but he's talking about people that you are in a exchange of information, that it's honest, it's transparent, and he's saying a person who tries to do that with too many people will come to ruin. You cannot be that open and that transparent with everyone. And instinctively, this is true. You can't go out today and, somebody says, how you doing? Well, let me tell you about my marriage and let me tell you about all the debt I've got right now. You can't, because you know what most people will do with that information? And wise people understand this. They'll just use that as gossip to talk about you later. And as Christians, we're often the worst. We just kind of dress it up in spiritual language, man. We kind of, who we need to pray for? Sheila. I'm sorry you were there. It's Frank. We all know it's Frank. We need to pray for it. We kind of dress it up a little bit different, but a wise person knows I can't have candor with everybody. I have to, if you try to do that with everyone, Solomon warns, A wise person understands if you have too many people that you're that open and honest with, you will come to ruin. He says instead, and this seems counterintuitive, he's saying you need to be careful who you let in. He says there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. You can't do that with 30 people. You can't do that with 12 people. You find if you have one or two people like this in your life, you are doing really well. You're really lucky. A friend who sticks closer than a brother. Because in terms of family relationships, and having family is great, but your brother or your sister, when you're in crisis or you're in celebration even, they have to be there. Doesn't mean they don't love you, but they have to be there. He had to be your best man. She had to be your maid of honor. It's just how it works. And Solomon says, that's great, have those kind of relationships, but there is a kind of friend who will actually choose you. And if you have somebody like that, you're doing really, really well. If you have one or two people like this in your life, you're doing well. He's essentially saying, don't go out and look for a quantity of acquaintances and friends. Go look for a quality friend, somebody. Put energy into who that person is. Begin to think, who is the person in moments of celebration? Who's the first person I call? In moments of crisis, who's the first person that I call? That person will actually stick with you. I have noticed and observed, when I observe wise people, I don't have a verse for this, but I think it's true. The older they get, the smaller the circle gets of people who they actually let in and they begin to trust. I think Jesus modeled this. When you read the stories of Jesus in the New Testament, have you ever noticed everybody wants to hang out with him? Everywhere he goes, there's 5,000 people. There's people followed him to the next village. Everybody wants to be around Jesus. He's turning water into wine, for crying out loud. Of course you want to be around him. Everybody wants to be around Jesus, but what does Jesus do? He surrounds himself with the 12, but even within those 12, it's really the three, James, Peter, and John, that he is close to. And if you're here and you go, no, I can be great friends with 12 people, I promise you one of them's a Judas. Somebody's behind your, I promise. You can only have a friend who sticks closer. You can only do this with one or two or three people. If you have that in your life, Solomon would say you are a rich man, you are a rich woman, because that is what adds quality to your life. A wise person is constantly evaluating friendships. Who do I have in proximity to me that is like that? Notice this next verse. This is really strange, but a good kind of strange. Proverbs 25, verse 20. These are all counterintuitive principles of friendship. Like one who takes away a garment on a cold day. Who does that? Solomon says that is a bad friend. Or like vinegar poured on a wound, is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. He's saying this is what a friend, oftentimes we want this person to be our friend, but they can't be our friend because they're a fool would be the words that Solomon uses, or for whatever particular reason. But they're like you show up, you share information about yourself, you tell them something that's going on in your life, your heart is heavy, and their response, it feels like, it's like they took a blanket from you on a cold day. If we just acted this verse out, it'd be kind of odd, wouldn't it? You've got a wound and I pour vinegar in it, or say you show up to coffee and you sit down, and this next part is like one who sings songs to a heavy heart. Say you show up and you're like, man, I just bombed the job interview and and I'm so sad. And you look at me and I just start singing to you. That would be odd. Cool. To the left, like what? Or even like Christian, like you tell me this horrible thing that happened. I'm like, our God is an awesome God. You're like, what is wrong with you, Jared? So I'm saying that kind of a friend is a person that refuses to be vulnerable to your pain. They block it. Say you show up, it doesn't work out, and it doesn't happen in such a way that they start singing a song to you, but you have friends that you are in heartache, something's happened to you, maybe you actually bombed the job interview and you show up to coffee or lunch and you say, I'm not doing so well, this just happened. And maybe you have a friend that this is the way that they take the blanket from you on a cold day. They just immediately kick into inspire mode You have friends like that? You sit down with them and you're like, I'm not doing well. Things are not going well for me today. And they're like, well, here's what you're going to do. You're going to believe it. You're going to achieve it. You're like, slow down, Tony Robbins. Like today, I just need somebody to sit here with me in this moment of crisis and pain. And Solomon says, a fool refuses to be vulnerable to your pain. They cannot empathize with you. They refuse to. They're not going to allow your emotional chaos to affect them or touch them at all. They refuse to empathize with you. And Solomon says a wise person is evaluating friends and saying, that's not the person that I need to be in proximity to. Or maybe you have a friend that you show up and you tell them, my husband, I'm disappointed in, what's going, it's Frank, man, I'm just disappointed. And things are not going well at home. And you ever have the friend who just ignores it? He's like, or she's like, I'm disappointed in the Lakers. That's who I. You're like, no. Are you here? They refuse to be vulnerable to your pain. And Solomon says a wise person has a friend who will actually sit there with you in that moment. They're not trying to fix you. They don't get out the Tony Robbins tapes and immediately try to cheer you up. They actually they're going to allow themselves to be vulnerable to your pain. So a fool can never do that. A fool actually, they're too selfish to care enough. Most of us, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but our relationships, our friendships are all transactional. We become friends with somebody because they offer us access to something, or they became friends with us because we offered them access to something. Another network of friends, a boat on the weekends, entrance into a golf community or golfing club. We become friends with them because they offer us something. We become a means to an end for other people. They become a means to an end for us. And Solomon says, a wise person searches out a friend where you are not a means to an end, you are the end. They show up not because you help them achieve some goal, but you are the goal. Your well-being, your health, your choices, you having wholeness in your life, that's the goal. And so they can actually sit there with you in your pain and in your grief. And there's not going to be that many people that can do that for you. And you can't do that for that many people. If you did that for everybody that was a friend of yours on Facebook, you would be miserable all day long. You can only do this for a few people. A wise person searches that out. Another counterintuitive principle of friendship. This is odd. When you read this, he says, wounds from a friend can be trusted. Verse 6 of chapter 27. Wounds from a friend can be trusted. Wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. Wounds from a friend can be trusted. But an enemy multiplies kisses. It's counterintuitive. But he's saying when you find that person, a wise person is searching out feedback in terms of marriage, in terms of finances, in terms of job, in terms whatever it may be. A wise person is searching out feedback from a friend. I have friends. I will go to coffee with them, and I kind of dread going to the coffee because I know I'm going to tell them something, and their feedback is not going to be what I want to hear. And wounds from a friend, that feedback, although I don't want to hear it, I need to hear this. Solomon says a wise person, you need to search that out. A wise person discerns there is a difference between feedback and criticism. There will always be people, if you're breathing today, you are going to get criticized for something. And criticism comes into your life to injure you. That's why somebody criticizes you. Feedback does not come into your life to injure you. It comes into your life to improve you. And a wise person searches out, not from everybody, but from a select few, maybe one or two people, feedback to help improve. Because wounds from a friend, if I trust that this is true, wounds from a friend can be trusted. I will be better because I hear the things that I don't want to hear. Do you have someone in your life who does that for you? That's Solomon's question. Search out a wise person to sit with you and share things about yourself that maybe you don't want anybody to know. And don't do that with everybody. Do that with someone that you say, wounds from this person, the truth from this person, that's actually going to build me up and make me a better person. Solomon is advising, he's encouraging, he's begging, find somebody In the same way you apply energy to romantic relationships, work relationships, family relationships, pour energy into your friendships, because these are the people who determine the direction, the quality of your life and my life. And that is why today in the atrium, we are doing everything we can. We are putting people in t-shirts. We brought Kayla on stage after we gave her 9 Red Bulls. We are doing everything we can just to encourage, because we just believe this is true. Friendship is so important. We want you to have the opportunity. I just don't want anybody in our church doing life alone. And I want you to have the opportunity to meet wise people. And so in the atrium today, as you walk out of church, there's towers with people's names on them, life group leaders. Take one of those tags, a night of the week that works for you. And if you haven't found a group, I just encourage you to find a group, because there's something so powerful about finding wise people. There's something so powerful for Roseanne and I about showing up to our small group on a Wednesday night and hearing other people who, yes, they're messing up. Yes, we're messing up, but they have the same goals. We're trying to raise kids. We're trying to do life in such a way that we stay married. And, we fight for marriage together. And there's just something about sitting in that circle and being around wise people that you just gain wisdom through that. And I just want that for you. I want that for everybody in our church. If you're new to church or you're coming back to church for the first time in a long time, and the idea of joining a small group is terrifying for you, I certainly understand that. Hang out as long as you need to. Hang out on the back row as long as you need to. We're going to keep asking, just to be honest with you, we're going to keep asking you to get in groups. And that's not to make it awkward for you. It's just that we believe that's the best thing for you. And that's the best thing for me spiritually, to be in a group with other people, to sit at a table with other people. It's something powerful about it. That you never can experience when you're just in a row. But if you're kind of coming back to church, you have a lot of doubts about God and getting in a group, you're like, I just would never do that. Then what I would encourage you to do, this verse is so powerful, because what you need to know at this stage of your faith, maybe you don't need to join a group because it's just the whole thing's just so terrifying. But this verse is so powerful. This is what Jesus says to you, what Jesus says to me, John 15, verse 15. He says this: "No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing." But this is what God says about you and about me. "But I have called you friends. For all things that I heard from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me," Jesus says, "but I have chosen you." You, when you were a fool, while you are a fool, while I have been a fool, while I am a fool, the voice of Jesus says you are a friend. And God has said about you, God has said about me, when you were wrong in every way in life, you are a friend. Sit next to me is what God's voice says to us. I choose you. Nothing about your behavior blocks you from relationship, and you are not a means to an end for God. You are the end. He has given everything for a friendship with you and with me. And maybe where you are on your spiritual journey today is you just need to hear that truth, that it is possible, before you have Christian friends, that the God of heaven and earth has called you a friend. You are not an enemy of God. He has called us friends. And we gather throughout homes throughout the course of the week to celebrate and to grow as friends of God, as friends of God. Let's pray together. God, I thank you that this truth that was spoken through Solomon 2,700 years ago, modeled through Jesus, it just has the power to shape us and change us in ways that nothing else does, who we surround ourselves with. God, and I just pray for, maybe it's a guy within the sound of my voice. Seems like in college or high school that was easy, but now this phase of life, this stage of life, he's kind of given up. Maybe there's one or two people he can call, but he just feels like it's hopeless trying to find a friend. And I just pray, God, maybe it's through this church. Maybe it's through a tag in the atrium. He can begin to find somebody who's closer than a brother. God, I pray for a female within the sound of my voice who came to IF this weekend, and she was inspired and she was encouraged. But it's not just in the gathering, it's in the circles, it's in the rows, being bent into circles that we begin to change. And I just pray that over everybody in our church today. I want this for myself. Pray I never lose it. Our friends determine the direction, the quality of our life. I want that for everyone in our church. He who walks with the wise grows wise. In Jesus' name we pray, and all of God's children said. So here's what we're going to do. In the atrium today, there's towers, and just check those out. Ask somebody who's in a white shirt that says circles are better than rows a question if you have questions about groups. If you go to a group, okay, this is just between you and I. If you go to a group and you don't like it, don't go back, okay? If you walk in and you go, that's just a bunch of fools. Yeah, you don't need to go back to it. But just find a group that works for you. If you need prayer today, you can come down front. We'd love to pray for you, pray with you. God bless you, my brothers and sisters. We'll see you next week. We go in the grace of Jesus, the peace of Jesus. Take care, everybody.